had 4 uncles in the Air Force during the war, and my dad was, he was called in too, but he didn't go because he was involved with working on the farm and that. And they just, you know, whenever family get-togethers and that, there was always talk about flying, and I had one uncle that's involved with the air show in London, and when I was younger, I used to always find out who was coming to the air show before the show was actually on and that. But I was always just crazy, always built millions of models and flew U-control models and then radio-controlled models, and then by that time I was old enough to learn to fly, so I went out and started taking lessons. But I didn't think I'd go this far. I crop dusted up in out of Eganville, Ontario, by Pembroke, and flew in Quebec and Ontario. That was my real introduction to real low flying. About 3 years ago, I was asked by the people who run the Woodstock Air Show if I was interested in performing the comedy routine down there. And that's how I started. They asked me, and I wouldn't give them an answer until I said I'd put together a routine, and I practiced it, and a couple months later I came back and showed it to them, and the rest is history. I started by doing that show and then other shows from that. A lot of air show contestants, or participants rather, who fly air shows, even flew air shows 30, 40 years ago, a lot of the fellows who did the comedy acts, a lot of the fellows did the truck top landing act or car top landing act. They go hand in hand, they did them together. And there's nobody up here in the Great White North doing that kind of work, so I always thought I had the airplane for the act. The Champ is a good airplane for that, and I just thought that it might go hand in hand here in Canada too, and it seems to be going over really good. I really enjoyed the first time I ever did the air show. Okay, I really, like at Woodstock when it was all over, you feel like you were playing ball and your team won, or at least you put out a good effort, and you know, and it was just a real good feeling, a satisfied feeling of that you helped all these guys put on this show and kind of proving to the crowd that airplanes can do more than just go up and go down, you know, fly straight and level, and because the airplane that I have isn't stressed for doing aerobatics or anything, and the comedy act it just kind of hovers on going into the aerobatic category, doing that kind of flying. But I really get a real thrill out of just working with some of these top guys that I watched when I was 6 years old that I'm now performing with, and that's a real honor for me.
You know, this automobile stunt driving has always interested me, I guess, like it does the kids today. And in Pekin, Illinois, my home near Peoria, and mid-USA was sort of the breeding grounds for this type of thing. And when I was 11 years old, I went to the Chicago World's Fair. And when I went back again the following year, when I was 12 years old, and I saw two men there working by the name of Jimmy Lynch and Lucky Teeter working for a great man by the name of Barney Oldfield, who was the first man to drive a car 2 miles a minute. He later worked for me in Miami in the 40s. And I saw these guys doing these stunts, and they were really working for a motor company and not really crashing cars, but doing on some two-wheel driving, a little bit like that. So I thought, well, if those old fellows can do it, because I was only 12 and 13 years old, if they can do it, I can do that. So I went home to Pekin, 160 miles from Peoria, or from Chicago, and we were at that time doing trampolines, so I had some show business in my blood. My grandfather having owned a chain of theaters and had vaudeville on. My brother, who was 6 years older, we decided that we would try some of this daring do. And about that time, a show came to the Pekin airport, an air show and ground show, where they did some batwing act and skydiving and some things like that, and some car stunts. And we heckled and booed because the car stunts were terrible. So the crowd dissipated, and we went over the fence and got into an old Whippet and some old cars, and we did some walls on our own. Well, that was the start of it. And then we didn't know how to book, we didn't know how to get the car, we didn't know how to make deals. And we started we joined 3 different shows, Batter Crooks and my brother Lee and myself, and we sort of picked the brains of these professionals. There were other shows around who we had to seek them out because there wasn't that many. And we then got back together again the following year and knew something about it. The first year, the first head-on collision we did, we had no idea that you were to get in the back seat and crash those cars or jump off the side. That's also a technique we learned later. To do a head-on or a brick wall or an ice wall, you get in the back seat of the car and lean over you rig the steering, or you rig the gas in reverse of pushing down. You pull back with a string or cord, and then when you come out of the last turn, you let it go and it goes whack into the wall or the other car. Well, we didn't know you was to lay down, and my brother driving a sports car at that time, a Kissel sports car, he tied a rope around his midsection, and Batter was driving the old wooden-bodied Pontiac, and he got in the back seat, but just sat down in the seat and braced his feet against the seat ahead, and when they hit, he went up through the roof, not completely, but he went up and it hurt his neck, and my brother was almost choked to death at the midsection. So we had a lot to learn, and we did learn by joining and observing, and later on it paid off, of course. You know, what's happening today is not that much. I travel around and I watch shows at fairs here, and I go to the States and to the Silver Dome. I go to the Astrodome, where I go every year, and I thought, well, hey, make this thing round robin rather than to cut the thing off in the 50s. When I did, my last jump was done in 1953 until the jump I did the other night in London and Delaware, which was 30 years later. So my reason for going back into this thing was simply that I don't think the people were getting their money's worth. So I intended to give it to them. I was going a little too fast, but not too fast that I didn't catch I had 8 cars out there as my receiving cars after I cleared this bus, and I hit the 5th car, which means I was in the ballpark. We were allowing for some 15, 20-foot variation. I was going a little too fast, but not that I wasn't all right. I went off to the left because we were working on a racetrack which is on the slope. I used the lowest part of the track, which was as level as possible. And I then peeled off the back trunk lids of 2 cars and then flipped in, I nosed in and went end for end in the thing, and my seat broke. We had picked the strongest possible seat we could find and assumed that would be all right. But it gave way in the back, and I went end over end, and of course I stayed anchored in my safety belt. But 2 of my daughters were there, Christine and Kimberly were there, and they had never seen me jump. And when that car went end over end, and my hand, the first thing that came out of the car was my hand is scarred across here, and The blood was spurting from it, and they saw my hand come up to pull myself up from this prone position. And of course, they were very upset about that, and I guess they figured, like, if his hand's that bad, how is the rest of him? They shake, and they worry, and they cry. And I worry a bit, but I don't cry about it. In reference to Ken Carter, who stayed at my home many times, and he came through. In fact, when he first he come through here with a traveling show more than 20 years ago, and he stayed at my Sebringville hotel, and he had seen the pictures, and he has used this on camera many times. He has seen the jump of the ramp, the old guy jumping ramp to ramp, and he thought that was a terrific idea because no one at that time was doing it. So he came back in the off season, and we met on several occasions, and I assisted him in all ways that I could, and followed him. And then when he came up with this river idea over the St. Lawrence at Morrisburg, he asked me what I thought of it. I said, well, it's catapulting something into the air, and then with the parachutes, I said, I suspect that would be all right. I said, but as far as a ramp landing, which he had talked about earlier over Lake Champlain in Vermont and New York, I said, forget it. But when it came down to the nitty-gritty and to the movie that perhaps many have seen on Devil at Your Heels, I was involved, and they sent a camera crew down to interview me, and they didn't use any footage of my comments because the comments were simply that there's no way that you can put aerodynamics and into a vehicle with no ballistic coefficient of and how much rocketry do you put a 2,400-pound thing into the air, and where is it going to land exactly? It was impossible, and I told them that, and they didn't. It wasn't used for what reason I don't know, but he called me just the week that he died, and he said, I have this because I have a takeoff ramp quite similar to the one he had. And he said, I have to have a ramp, and he gave me the specifics, being 13 feet 9 at the top and 5 feet 1 at the middle and 14 feet. He gave me a lot of statistics that we both knew very well. And it seems to me that pitch and angle was very severe for any speed, because that's what a ramp-to-ramp jump is all about, is your angle and your pitch. And 17 degrees is about what is used by the people in the trade, and then a little more speed or a little less speed. And I've been with him. I was with him in the Astrodome when he got hurt. I was with him, and we did a show down for another network in Miami, or in Tampa. We knew in the trade that sooner or later anyone doing that dangerous a stunt was going to be badly hurt. In his case, we really all knew pretty well his ultimate end. Perhaps he did too, I don't know. But the fact that someone made a remark, suicide, well, I think suicidal was more like it, because we've often been referred to as that's a stupid stunt, or this or that, and they have no knowledge, the criticizers have no knowledge of what we put into it. In his case, I'm told that the thing being overpowered or still spewing out the hydrogen peroxide, nitrogen activated chemical, obviously is what sent him too high and too far. Upon working out the graph on that particular jump, I saw no way that he could hit that down ramp, because it was way too short and his pitch was too severe on takeoff. So I wasn't there. I had been many times, but I just didn't choose to be there on that incident.
Ken Carter first attempted to jump the pond at Westgate Speedway July 31st. After he was pulled from the water unhurt, Carter pledged to try again.
We'll be back Labor Day weekend, and I'm going to get this car across this pond. I swear to you I will.
Early Sunday morning, Carter kept his promise, but with tragic results. As an overflow crowd watched and divers stood by in the pond, Carter suited up and prepared for the jump. The rocket car itself had just been repainted on the right side for better visibility, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Just after midnight, Carter made his second attempt. The rocket car landed about 150 feet past the landing ramp. As police struggled to hold back spectators, rescuers worked for more than 20 minutes trying to free the 45-year-old stunt driver from the wreckage. Carter was rushed to hospital but was pronounced dead on arrival.
To To see where someone die has got to be who you knew so well that it certainly is a gripper. I have seen other people severely hurt, not knowing whether they were going to be carried out and survive or not. In his case, of course, I had knowledge ahead of time, so seeing the tape, I was prepared for it. It does nothing for me, but it does nothing less for me either. I mean, it wouldn't bother me to continue my stunts as I have them planned, because that was never in my planning. The tape that I have a copy of shows the gross errors that were involved. It was certainly overpowered, and the angles were wrong. There was just no way that anything was right. He had a lot of nerve, but I'm afraid that his ability was limited, perhaps of his sight. He didn't see that well out of one eye. A lot of reasons that I didn't participate further down the road with him.
The comedy act is a mixed-up hairbag flying routine where someone doesn't know how to fly and they take off going across across the runway or downwind or up on one wheel, bounce around until you finally get staggering into the air, and the announcer goes wild, and the people really buy it for a while anyways, until they realize that you would have crashed 30 seconds ago and you shouldn't still be flying around even though it's pretty hairy flying. But it's been an act that's been done for 40, 50 years now. And it really hasn't changed, except there's very few people up here doing it in Canada. Somewhere on the ground watching someone fly doing an air show, they have no idea how the pilot feels inside. That's one of probably the hard things about air shows. Like, you'll never be able to convey that. You can convey the grace or the hot dog 200-mile-an-hour upside down pass or something, but you can't convey how much in control you are inside the airplane. Doing that kind of flying, and because I practice all the time, it's just like taking off and landing to anybody else. Or for you to go and drive your car and just make a right-hand turn or left-hand turn. It's the same thing. To us, it's a totally natural feeling. We're not all disoriented and discombobulated in the cockpit when you get upside down, even though at first you'll find it that way if you ever take aerobatic lessons, because everything, a lot of the controls are reversed. But it's just the same old practice routine to us, even though the first time you see it, it's pretty wild. I was in an accident a couple years ago. I had an engine quit on me. I've had a number of engine failures, but this is just one that quit and put me in a circumstance that I'd rather forget. But it doesn't bother me now. I just had an engine failure and I ended up upside down in the cornfield, but it happened low to the ground and I had nowhere to go. And I don't have a violation of my record over it. And actually, the guys were quite happy that I just walked away. But the next day, I had a lot of people telling me, get back out there, and this is back before I was ever doing air shows, and get back out there and get back flying, and that's what you got to do. And there's a lot of people have just, little incidences like something happened on a taxiway or you bump another airplane or something like that, and it bothers them so much they won't go back flying anymore. Because they think, what if something happens in the air? But I think that's what proved to me that I wanted to fly as bad as I do, is because I went right back at it again. It bothers me. I learned a lot from it. And I'm not saying it would never happen again. Once you get into the air shows a little bit, it gets in your blood. And I put a lot more into this than 8 hours a day, and 5 days a week. And I'm not rich, but we have a lot of fun. I think you can make a living at it, and I'm going to try. They say the first couple of years you'll starve, and I'm in that stage right now.
I think that what one gets out of this thing is a peace of mind that they can do something better or as good as anybody and better than most. And now that I'm back competing somewhat, I noticed the other night at a show, they were wondering, well, what's he here for? Well, I just want to know what's going on yet and stay in touch. And I suspect that it is about as professional as you can get.
Why let, the idea of maybe getting hurt doing something, which can be proven safe if you practice it. Why let that stop you? You're not going to live forever. You're only going around once. Like, I'm not going to go out there and look danger in the face or look death in the face and laugh. Not that way. In air shows, you're trying more to make the easy look spectacular and the spectacular look difficult. You never attempt the impossible, but it looks that way.